And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very informative webinar, Winning the Battle for Local Search. Today we have two very qualified and very excellent speakers. First, joining us from Denver is Lindsay Sharon. Lindsay is Vice President of Physician Marketing at Healthgrades. And in that position, she drives strategy, education, and awareness for physicians and practice managers. She's been with Healthgrades since 2006. Is that right, Lindsay?
That's correct.
That's great. So she has a wealth of knowledge and experience to deal with, and really sees a lot of the long-term trends here in local search marketing. And I'm joined here in New York with Reed Mullins. Reed is our Senior VP of Business Development. He focuses on creating lasting strategic partnerships with the leading brands in healthcare and search marketing.
Excellent. Thank you, David.
And thank you. And I am David Brooks. I'm co-founder and marketing advisor to Doctor.com. Great. So today's webinar Reed will first talk about how to outthink, but not outspend your competition, and how to create a compelling online presence that gets you in front of more patients. Lindsay will then talk about the anatomy of a best-in-class profile that draws patients away from competition, and also how to maintain your profile and your presence to continue online referrals. So Reed?
Excellent. So David, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So first, I'd like to take a brief moment to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So Doctor.com is the leader in healthcare marketing automation. So that's software and services for reputation management and new patient acquisition. We only work in healthcare, so we're uniquely qualified. We work on local business marketing issues that those modern medical practices have. Over the past 5 years, we've forged partnerships with the consumer brands that drive the most value for our clients. And in that context, I'm very excited to be here presenting today with Lindsay from Healthgrades. So the battle for local search is not really a battle for the #1 position in the search engine. And as we'll learn in a second, that's kind of old thinking, and it's a little bit short-sighted. Because winning at local search really means you need patience in chairs. So while being #1 on the SERP page itself seems impressive, it doesn't really fill your booking calendar. So I want to talk a little bit about the patient journey. So today, your patient is now your consumer. And as consumers, they're paying more for their healthcare through higher premiums, through higher deductibles and copays. And because they're paying more, they're becoming increasingly fickle about where and how they shop for you, the doctor. Converting that active consumer into a patient at your practice is a journey really with 4 parts. The first part is about attraction. So this is getting the attention of the patient and arousing their interest. Typically things like pay-per-click ads or other sort of promotional methods. This is the focus of SEO, and an entire business has been built around it. We think it's because it's a relatively mechanical process for SEO companies and gurus, despite the fact that it's become extremely expensive and extremely inefficient for you, their client. So while many web agencies tell you to focus on this attraction part of the patient journey, you're really better served by thinking about the patient's experience in the middle and towards the end of this journey. So these sections we refer to as convert and close. So in the conversion stage, this is about creating a compelling presence on the internet, really telling your brand story. Because this is where you need to get the patient to pick up the phone and make the phone call, fill out the inquiry form, and how do you do that? This is really about having rich, unique content on your website that's convincing the patients. It's about having rich listings or citations on the top local healthcare sites and business sites. It's about having great and fresh patient reviews, as well as a consistent presence on social media. All of these things really add up to social proof. And so that's about conversion. That's about them sort of reaching out to you. And then it's about sort of closing them, making them patients, about how easy is it for them to book. And it's about getting the patient in the chair. It's about having great testimonials. It's about having an excellent experience with your front desk and staff. And when they get in there, when they're in your office and they're having that experience, it's about being able to delight them. And so there's a few stats I want to drop here that are really important, because if you can delight your patients and customers, you're going to be able to get more of that social proof online feedback, sort of positive reviews. So 92% of consumers trust recommendations from friends above all other forms of marketing. 77% of consumers are more likely to buy a new product when learning about it from friends or family. And the ROI is 5 times higher on returning patients than it is when you have to sort of get new patients in the door through those attraction methods. And additionally, you just have more influence and control over the factors that affect how the patient will call and what experience they have once they call your office and actually get in and start to have their appointment. So let's talk a little bit about this online presence. You can go to the next slide for me. So I wanted to lay out just a few additional reasons why I should focus on those conversion paths and the sort of closed paths parts of the funnel and not merely that attraction phase. And so here we have a little chart. Let me define for you these columns quickly. A non-branded search is a query that doesn't mention you by name. Whereas a branded search term is one where you are specifically being mentioned, you or your business name. So those non-branded searches, those are the ones associated with the attract portion of the funnel I was talking about before. These are patients using generic terms and they're early in their discovery phase. In fact, they're so early in weighing their provider decision, they don't even have a name yet. These patients are essentially comparison shopping. In marketing language, we refer to them as tofu or top of the funnel. This means these patients are less committed to you as an individual doctor, and they're more likely to be kicking tires, calling the practice to do a little bit of research, maybe try to get prices. And without searching for a provider by name, we can infer that they don't have a referral. They haven't heard about you from a friend or colleague. Again, these folks are tofu. They're just sort of top of the funnel shoppers, and they're not as serious. In comparison, think about a branded search. That's the second column. This is a patient that's looking for you by name. This is where conversion in the funnel really begins. This is a referral situation. This is a patient who's seen an ad or driven by your practice and seen your shingle. This is a patient that's serious about seeking treatment. They have your name, they're checking you out before they call or before they book. Let me stress that this patient is very much in play, since those referrals, they're not a sure thing anymore. So let's think about the volume and the experience of trying to gather these searches. There are probably less searches happening on those sort of branded ones for your name or your business's name, but there's less competition on those keywords as well. So they cost less. And in fact, because there's less competition, they're easier to rank. And because you have literally hundreds of directories listing you and your practice, you can dominate just not position number 1, but positions 1 through 10, really across the whole Google or Bing search experience page. And while those volume of searches for your name are pretty low, the quality of the searchers are very high. They're in the final stages. They're making a provider decision, and their probability of booking is really high. So at the end of the day, those branded searches are just more profitable, and they're yours to lose. Let's talk a little bit about sort of what makes those searches happen and what the experience is like. So these patients doing these branded searches or reputation searches, they're checking you out online, and they're making these subtle judgments based on what they see. 1, is your name, phone number, and address, is it clear and consistent no matter where they go? And this isn't just about like finding a wrong phone number and being confused. It's about your real reputation. Are you taking your online presence seriously, and what does that say about your business? When the patient is out there, do they see the same thing on each listing? Because if they don't, that's truly a sign of neglect. Things like having your first and last name transposed, things like having duplicate listings across the variety of sites where listings exist. And then, and this is becoming less common, but it's still an issue, are you even listed on these top sites at all? There's many situations where there's not even a listing, or if there is, it was created by a patient, it's unclaimed, and it really doesn't have any sort of valuable information on it. Then, while the patient is on these sites, what they're checking for is, do you have reviews? Are those reviews any good? Do you have enough reviews, and are they fresh? Because if you don't have recency and velocity, those reviews are going to start to look like maybe you're at a business who haven't gotten any, 2 years old, the ones you do have. And then they're looking to see, are you on social media? How many likes and followers do you have? How much do you post? How active are you? And one of the things to mention here is that if you're going to take your social presence seriously, it's not something, it's like a short-term one-off project. It's something you should really be doing on an ongoing basis. There's nothing worse than putting up a blog and then just having nothing on it after the first 2 weeks. And lastly, there's some technical issues, mostly about your website, that really turn people off. These are things like, can I read your website on my mobile phone? Do the pages work? Are there lots of broken links? And does the site take forever to even load up in the first place? And for those of you on the line who've been paying attention to the internet for a while, forever in today's language means 1 or 2 seconds. Things need to load instantly. And in addition to the patients, it's about the search engines. So Google and other search engines use these and almost 200 other data points as they're using their ranking algorithms to decide and determine who's going to get the top search positions, both in the organic SERP and in the sort of the local section. And remember, many of these factors are within your control once you take ownership and manage your online presence and your online reputation. Now, this is talking about how to enrich those profiles and where it's most important. I know you see these all over the internet, these kind of grayed out, sad doctor icons. It's an indication that a doctor doesn't care about their internet presence. They don't care about their online reputation. And one of the things I can tell you is that this is essential. At doctor.com, we have enough search traffic to do some short and small studies. And one of the things that we decided was to understand how important it was to have an image. So what we found out is that you are 3 times more likely to get click-through on your profile if you have an image. This is something that patients are absolutely looking for. And if you don't do it, you're anonymous, you're invisible. The patients that are doing their research, they're human and they want to see you as human. They're looking for photos, they're looking for details about your education, your accolades, qualifications. They want to know that you're real. They want to make sure that you're a human and that you're credible. So, let me stress this again. You really need professional quality photos of you and your staff. They need to be warm and inviting. You want images of your waiting room to show that it's clean. You want to show that you have modern equipment. And if possible, and it's appropriate for your specialty, dramatic but tasteful before and after photos. The other thing we know that people are looking at is reviews. That same study found that if you have even a single review, you get 5 times the click-through. So make sure you have reviews. And then it's important to have a solid social media presence with ongoing activities. Our research has shown that a poor online presence is one of the key causes for what we call referral leakage. This is a moment when a patient has heard your name from a friend or seen an ad that you've made or heard about you from a physician, but they don't end up coming to you for one reason or another. Turns out 70% of patients are Googling doctors' names, even with a referral from a friend or one of your colleagues. So you really need to take your online presence into account. I want to talk about reviews again, and I want to talk about quality directories. So one important thing about directories is that it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 positive online reviews and the richest profile imaginable, if the website publishing those reviews isn't something that patients actually visit, or isn't something that's being respected by major search engines. So here's some ways to critically evaluate the impact of sort of where you're controlling your online presence. One, does the review site come up on the first page of Google, Bing, Yahoo? And have people actually heard of it? If you have a site that is very well filled out and has a tremendous number of reviews from some initiative you're taking, but it doesn't really meet those 2 criteria, it just isn't that valuable. Its value is dubious. So again, to really win in local search, you should be focusing on the websites that are seen and respected by patients and the search engines. And it's in this context that I want to kick it over to Lindsay from HealthGrades, which is one of the most highly respected websites by both patients and search engines.
Great, thanks very much, Reed. So a quick note for those of you that may not have heard about HealthGrades until today. We are one of the largest consumer resources for healthcare information, and with more than 30 million people visiting us a month, that amounts to a lot of opportunity for you to connect with the right patients that are looking for you on healthgrades.com. At HealthGrades, we're in the business of transforming healthcare data into rich and transparent profiles for physicians so that consumers have the confidence to make the right healthcare decisions for not only themselves, but their families as well. To this point, I'd like to reiterate a conversation that Reed just had about the consumer and introduce you to Rachel. Rachel is the modern healthcare consumer, or what we like to call the chief head of household, as she represents the leading demographic making healthcare decisions for her family and is who we see most visiting not only HealthGrades, but your websites as well. Rachel is a commercially insured female who spends a lot of time asking friends and family for advice about life, about healthcare, and prioritizes convenience and quality when making her healthcare decisions. She starts with the recommendations based on the thoughts and feelings of her most trusted advocates. Additionally, she's at the stage in her life when her healthcare expenses are increasing. And while she has a PCP and has had one for a while, she no longer just relies on a referral from that source to choose a specialist. She's doing her own research and making judgments based on what she can source and validate online. In fact, similar to what you heard earlier, 77% of patients on Healthgrades will choose a provider without a referral from a PCP. They're relying on those emotional connections that their friends have told them about and are seeking to validate that information online. And why wouldn't they? The modern healthcare consumer, or Rachel, has been conditioned by other marketplaces. We live in a transparent world where everything that can be known about goods and services will be known. Today, you can find, compare, and book the best lodging on Airbnb, dinner at your new favorite restaurant on OpenTable, and of course, book a ride from Uber, all with a click of a few buttons. These are the brands that your patients are interacting with on a daily basis, and they now expect the same convenience, access, and transparency when searching and selecting their healthcare providers. To expand on this a little bit further, I wanted to highlight some of the commonalities across these services. There are a variety of things that they have in common. They provide transparency, of course, providing us access to the information we need to make informed decisions. But they do this not only with objective data, but subjective, emotional, and relevant content as well. They also organize the data from objective third-party sources so that it's actionable and usable by consumers. And they grew rapidly because at the heart of each marketplace, they allow for personal information and social sharing. These brands are also disruptive. For every Uber, a taxi, for every Yelp ad, a yellow page, and of course, for every Amazon, a neighborhood store. And they've removed the friction that sits between us and our everyday needs. They're extremely large because they have succeeded by not only building a successful brand, but also focusing on the relationships with the consumers searching for their care. So like those consumers, the healthcare consumer expects a lot of the exact same things. Healthcare consumers expect access to transparent information, everything from the experience that they can expect to your experience in the healthcare field, as well as costs and quality, and of course, the feedback that Reed mentioned from other patients. In addition, they want the ability to compare multiple doctors, as many come to our site with at least 3 names in mind. They also expect a personalized experience, one that works around their schedule, their needs, and of course their interests. It's no longer acceptable to require consumers to spend hours making calls to uncover simple answers to questions about your practice that should be at their fingertips. And above all, they of course want convenience, often selecting a doctor based on the ability to schedule online or get an appointment quickly. In fact, about 65% of healthgrades.com visitors make an appointment within 1 week, and we are now seeing that go down to just a few days with scheduling enabled. So as I mentioned, these other marketplaces have set a high bar in meeting consumer expectations, and we need to do the same thing with the delivery of healthcare. We are seeing it manifest in our patient journey data as well. As such, I wanted to take the next few moments to share with you Healthgrades' 4 principles for building and maintaining a best-in-class profile. First, data must be accurate to be found. Reed mentioned this earlier with the attract phase, and it is, without a doubt, critical for you to claim your listings and ensure your profile data, at a bare minimum, name, address, and phone number, is accurate, up-to-date, and credible across the web on an ongoing basis. But of course, it doesn't stop there. That's just the beginning. Consumers are looking for all kinds of data. They've been conditioned to research and ask questions and compare. Your address is no longer enough. which is why our mission is to aggregate and display trusted information that helps consumers and providers make meaningful connections. We aggregate data from a variety of sources and make it as actionable as possible. However, of course, we realize that the best source of information about you is, of course, from you, which leads us to the second principle. You need to make sure to tell your story. Tell the story you want the market to hear and your patients to resonate with. It's the only way for you to really attract the patients you want for your practice. Let's take this next view as an example. I mentioned it's important to claim your profile, but it's also extremely important to differentiate yourself. Do you want your potential patients to find you as the doctor on the left or as the doctor on the right? It should come as no surprise that the doctor on the right not only attracts more visits, but converts better, as patients with a referral in hand are able to validate their recommendation, or, of course, be persuaded away from who they were comparing you against, including personal information, like those that Reed had mentioned earlier, photo, video, your care philosophy, appointment availability, bio. This is all low-hanging fruit that can go a long way as far as managing your reputation and making important, critical connections with patients seeking your care. Reed also mentioned the importance of reviews, and I'll touch on this as well. However, I also wanted to mention that in addition to collecting reviews, we highly encourage practices to not only read every review, but respond as well. And responding to both positive and negative reviews is important, as this is just another opportunity for you to share your personality or the culture of your practice. Our early data suggests that the impact of a professional, timely, thoughtful response outweighs that of a potentially negative review in the eyes of many consumers. Speaking of reviews, Principle 3 is to encourage your patients to share their experience, not only with their friends and family, which they're of course already doing, but more importantly, publicly online, where other potential patients are searching for you. Whether we like it or not, reviews are not only trusted, but they lead to action and support the convert phase of the patient journey. On health grades, we see doctors with patient ratings receive a 1.6 increase in calls to appoint, and when they also have the open text reviews that provides more context about their care, that jumps to 2.8. This is irrespective of review sentiment. It's simply having this user-generated content present on their profile. Reviews, of course, send a signal that you are not only open for business, but are actively seeing and seeking new patients. Aside from reviews, which we spend a lot of time talking about and helping practices to acquire, it's sometimes a longer narrative that's more appropriate to convey a patient's experience, their journey, or the impact a practice or doctor has had on their life. As we know in marketing, storytelling is extremely powerful. Stories from your patients allow potential patients a peek into what they can expect and provide an emotional connection with your brand. In some cases, it really is best to leave the heavy lifting to your biggest fans. Personal stories are credible and human and really speak to the emotional aspect of choosing healthcare. And last but definitely not least is Principle 4, enable appointment self-scheduling. Online scheduling is extremely impactful for not only driving new patient acquisition, but also improving the patient experience and thus retaining the patients you already have. According to a 2016 Accenture survey, 81% of consumers want immediate online scheduling, but only 2% have access to schedule today. Additionally, according to a study that Health Grades funded earlier this year, 4 out of 5 patients say they are more likely to choose a physician who offers online appointment scheduling versus a completely identical provider who does not. The stats shown here also speak for themselves. Reed commented on these as well. 67% of consumers choose online scheduling over location. We've always been taught location, 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 but that's no longer the case. The practices who offer frictionless online scheduling are those that are leading the pack in patient acquisition, as online scheduling gives consumers that 24/7 access that fits their lifestyle today. And of course, it's not just consumers. Self-scheduling also drives referrals, those referrals that are super important to driving your business. Nearly 40% of appointments are booked outside of the standard office hours. So it's important to have this online availability. In addition to reducing referral leakage, referrals are driven just by the fact that this access is available. Other physicians can book an appointment with you while the patient is still in their office, or will just simply be more inclined to refer a patient to a provider who is meeting the needs of their patients by providing convenient and transparent access to their schedules. So to recap, I wanted to go back and just quickly revisit the 4 principles for best-in-class profiles according to what Healthgrades has been seeing over multiple years. The first, of course, is transparent, accurate, and complete data. The second principle we discussed is telling your story. The more you can share about your personal brand, the more attractive you are to potential patients. And of course, you always want to be focused on the feedback of your actual patients, whether that's through reviews or testimonials or the patient stories I mentioned that show a more complete and emotional relationship with your practice. And last, but definitely not least, one of the most impactful things we've seen is online scheduling. The more convenient it is to book an appointment with you, the better it is for everyone. So I hope you have found these 4 principles helpful, and hopefully they resonate with your practice and as a few takeaways for you from our chat today. I'd now like to pass it back to Reed to share a special bonus.
Yeah, I wanted to celebrate the sort of joining of our organizations and not only just this webinar, but our product launches, and really pop the champagne bottle by offering this special bonus. So any of you that are out there who are listening and have attended the webinar or even just signed up for it with your email, we're offering a free 360-degree web analysis and consultation. And if you like what you see and you decide to sign up, Healthgrades and I have decided to waive the setup fee for any sign up that happens this month. So there's still a few days left. And with that brief announcement, I think it's time to get into the question and answer.
Yeah, great. And thank you, everyone. So in the Livestorm webinar platform, there's a chat window, and there should be a button that you can submit questions to. Some people have already emailed in some questions, so we'll start with them. But if you want, just add your questions there. I see some people are typing already. And of course, we'll leave these numbers up there. If you have more information or more questions, you want more information about Healthgrades or doctor.com, those numbers will ring to our support lines, and you can get some more information. Okay, let's see. This is a question from, I'll just use first name and last initials, Dan N. Okay, so Dan asks, if you're number 1 in search rank, how many patients will actually call? I guess, why don't we start, maybe Reed? I think that's probably more for you, right?
Yeah, that sounds like I can handle. So that's an interesting question. So again, so the question is, if you're number 1 in search rank, I assume you mean sort of organic SERP, the top of the 10 in Google or Bing, how many patients will actually call you? So obviously the volume of searches really varies from city to city. But there are some interesting benchmarking stats. So one of the things that we discovered is that about 43% of people click on that first branded search result. And then after that, only about 20% click on the second. After that, it becomes 15%. And then by the time you get into the sort of 4th and 5th, you get this logarithmic decline where really nobody even ends up on the second page at all. if you're then asking how many actually call, what kind of actions do you get, I have some stats there. So if a user ends up on a doctor.com profile, we find that something like 1 in 4 people who visit the listing end up having some kind of interaction. Either they make a phone call or they do some sort of form submission. And by the way, just one thing to say is it doesn't actually reflect real patient flow, because at the end of the day, the user is calling or contacting the office, and there's so many variables on how folks' office staff is managing that sort of inbound. It's really hard for us to say, but those are some stats on what happens from search to contact.
Okay. Lindsay, is there anything else that you want to answer to that one?
No, I think that was great. Very thorough.
Okay. So there's a question. This is from Sarah. How do you deal with the hundreds of listing sites that scrape old, outdated information? Wow, it's a never-ending problem. Reed, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah.
We did a recent blog post about this very issue.
Yeah, we really just got into this. So, like the question itself indicates, there are hundreds of listing sites that are out there. And they're mostly getting data from all kinds of different places. A lot of it starts from Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services with that NPI file, but that's 60% wrong. And then that data ends up getting sort of chewed up by the various data aggregators that are out in the world. And then you have the sort of flow from old insurance claims, and all of that is being spun together by folks like Healthgrades and the other people, other organizations in our network, and they're really trying to make their best effort to publish what's accurate. At the end of the day, you can only really know that the information is right if you have a direct connection to the healthcare provider, and then that direct connection is recent. So a lot of things that we see out in the web with our various partners, and Lindsay, maybe you can speak to this after I'm done, is that the publishing site, the listing site, will take the first party data for some period of time. Sometimes it's only 3 months. And then after that, it's no longer quote unquote verified. Because as all of you know, if you were to close your business or leave it to join a different practice or move, the first thing you're going to do isn't necessarily go and claim hundreds of listings and make those updates. So those websites, those directories have to do just their best to try to keep it updated and accurate. And we actually have some products that are oriented all around this, but I don't need to dig into that right now. But suffice to say that we are a single point of entry to try to correct that exact issue, and it is pernicious. So, Lindsay, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would align with everything you just said. Healthgrades has a lot of the same things in place that Reed just mentioned, as far as very kind of complicated hierarchy and algorithm rules to ensure freshness and accuracy of data. We also employ kind of matching that data against multiple sources to try to ensure the best data out there. And of course, it does start with some of those sources that Reed mentioned. And so if that is our only source of data, that can be a problem, but we are actively managing that data every day to ensure it's as accurate as possible.
For further reading on the subject, our VP of Enterprise Sales, Jorge Sierra, just published a blog post about this about a month ago. It's called Untangling the Healthcare Data Web. So it's pretty good reading. It's doctor.com/blog, and you can find it there. This question comes from another Sarah, Sarah M. What are some of the essential elements of a Healthgrades listing that are associated with more responses, more appointments or views?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, of course, the unique, rich content that we talked about in the presentation is critical. The more transparent and complete a profile is, the better the engagement we see from patients visiting the profile. So if you think back to the doctor on the left versus the doctor on the right, it's really important to make sure that you're not just managing your listing information, but you're really differentiating yourself for what you want to be known for in the market. Photo, care philosophy, and bio would be the top 3 things we would encourage doctors to log into our portal and update. And of course, being transparent about your appointment availability. Even if you're not ready to enable your schedule online, of course, even just sharing your hours or that you accept Saturday appointments or same day appointments can really go a long way as far as providing that convenience for patients looking for you. And the user-generated content is really important. We talked a lot about reviews, and that's definitely in the top 3 of what patients are looking for. They've been conditioned by other markets, and if you don't have patient feedback, it does put you at a disadvantage. Top 3, of course, is what I said, and it's really only second to insurance accepted. So right after they confirm that you accept their insurance, they're looking to validate the care they can expect by what other patients are saying.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. There's another. I don't want to give away. We have a third question from a third Sarah. This is pretty funny. I work for an oncology practice in Nevada and is not affiliated with a hospital group, but I've noticed that our doctors are being associated with the hospitals they round up. When users click on the profile, the phone number is that of the hospital, not ours. I have a HealthGrade business account and I've claimed all my profiles and optimized them to the best of my ability, but how do I get around the phone number issue? We want them to call us, not the hospital.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Sarah, and I'm also happy to follow up with you after the webinar and make sure we get you in touch with the right support folks that can resolve that for you. Phone number is one of those trickier things, as I mentioned, the variety of sources that we get data from. And so we do have some hierarchy rules that we're actually improving currently around making sure that if you've claimed a different profile, then we are respecting that phone number rather than those of the affiliated hospitals. So I'm not entirely sure about your specific situation, but definitely happy to help you resolve it today or this week.
Okay. Shelley C. adds a question. How often does the online scheduling become a problem once patient is there for an appointment due to software issues causing overbooking? And I think maybe we can talk about that. And also, there was another question I got an email. It's sort of similar. That basically it's around the whole issue of taking appointments from your website. Who wants to handle that question?
Maybe I'll jump in on this one. I actually see another question in here from a vet saying, how does online appointment scheduling work on a doctor.com physician profile? How does it connect to an EMR scheduling system? These are basically 3 separate questions that are just all about how does online booking work. So I'll sort of address the first question first, which is, how does it, how often are there software issues with overbooking? We've built our system to make it an option for a practice to enable double booking if they feel so inclined. Because there are a lot of practices who, especially things like dermatology where the visit time is really short, where it's acceptable for them to put 2 bookings on the schedule. So we allow for that, but that's an option. The situation you're sort of projecting on is one where like a software issue causes overbooking. We actually have not seen that as a problem. These other 2 questions, are more broad. How does online appointment booking and appointment scheduling work? So at doctor.com, we've built a system where it sort of can work at multiple levels. So let's say you're a practice who is, who has an EHR that is kind of rare and doesn't have any API connectivity and no one can connect to, or you don't have an EHR at all. You can use the doctor.com scheduling to create HIPAA compliant structured emails that go to your office staff who will handle those inbounds kind of like any other lead, as if a patient had picked up the phone to call. And all you do then is you indicate the days of the week or the times of the day that you want to expose for online scheduling, and then you can just be responsive when the patients want to use them. So there's that level. It's kind of the most disconnected. We then have a version which is considered one-way connectivity, where we basically connect into the practice's EHR and pull out real-time availability and display that real-time availability for patients. If a patient selects a time, we then push either into the EHR or to the user's email, depending on their preference, and from there let them finish the scheduling after talking to the patient. This is actually the most popular because we know a lot of businesses and practices see only certain kinds of patients on certain days and want to make certain qualifications. So we didn't want to sort of mess with their workflow. The last version, which is the most intensive and is called two-way integration, is one where it is effectively real-time, deep connected. It's as if the patient was sitting at your office manager's desk putting themselves on your calendar. We've seen that a little bit more rarely and only in sort of hyper-modern progressive practices. But we have the capability to do any and all of those.
Great. Here's an email question from Winston G. Are branded search terms more expensive in AdWords? Why should I focus on branded terms if not that many people search on them? Maybe you could.
Yeah, this is sort of more in my camp. So, it's an interesting question, and it's actually like a relatively common thought that a branded search term would be more expensive than sort of a non-branded. But you have to remember that your brand is your name as a person, or the name of your business or facility. It's not like your name Nike or Adidas, unless you are, I suppose. Those giant brands can be more expensive because you're engaging against a competitive community. But we're really talking about your name as a doctor, or your small business's brand, or even your hospital or facility's brand. Those aren't particularly expensive. In fact, the cost is kind of trivial. In many cases, it'll be like a quarter a click, since there's not that many people competing for most names.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question. Again, it's an email question from Carol V. Do you have some stats about how much better the more complete? Oh, I think there was a slide, Lindsay, that talked, you had two different side-by-side slides.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any stats about how much better the one on the right looked, in terms of how much better that performed versus the one on the left, the incomplete profile versus the complete profile? I think the implication is it worth the effort to go and add all those extra stuff in there? Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And yes, it's definitely worth your while. The data we have shows that when we have a complete enhanced profile, those profiles receive 5 times the traffic of those profiles that I showed you on the left-hand side. So it's really important as far as driving discoverability in search. Search engines really love that unique content. And of course, Healthgrades also features the enhanced profiles in our own search listings as well. So it really helps you stand out above your competition. Additionally, 52% of patients are more likely to appoint with providers that have a more complete, comprehensive, and personalized profile. And we also see that when you have the patient experience scores that we talked about, the ratings and reviews, there are about 30% more appointments booked on providers with that user-generated content. So it really does show in the data that the profiles are much more engaging and really lead to those conversions that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think it's all the more compelling that that performance statistic comes at little to no cost, except the cost to the staff to actually do that work, versus hundreds of thousands of dollars that someone might spend on advertising to generic words, where the patient is still just, as Reed was saying, shopping around and not really serious or committed to actually looking for a provider.
Right, great point.
Great, all right. Well, it's coming up on 45 minutes, and I'd like to be respectful of everyone's time. We booked this for 45 minutes, so we'll end it there. Thank you, everyone, for staying with us on the webinar. We really appreciate it. Immediately following the webinar, we'll send out a email that will include a link to the replay in case you joined us after we started. And you can also share that link on social media with other providers that you might know who'll be interested. And look for we'll add a link there for the attachment of all of our slides. That's it for today. Thank you very much to Lindsay and Healthgrades for participating. Thank you, Reed.
Mm-hmm. Pleasure.
We will catch you next month.